I trusted her. Then she stole my identity, drained my savings, and watched me collapse. The truth will shock you. "You're not Harrison Blake," the officer said, holding my ID up to the fluorescent light. "That's impossible," I whispered. My own face stared back from the plastic, but the name printed below wasn't mine anymore. Scarlett Miller, my daughter-in-law, had rewritten my identity right down to the licenses that defined my career. That night, sitting in the back of a police cruiser, I realised the woman who called me family had been dismantling my life piece by piece for years. It started quietly like most betrayals do. Back then, in 2021, Scarlett was just my father's new wife. She was elegant in that glassy, performative way, always overdressed for simple dinners, her perfume too sharp, her laughter a little too calculated. At first, I thought she was good for him. My father, Samuel Blake, 54, had been lonely after my mother passed. He met Scarlett at a real estate conference in Denver and said she made him feel young again. By that Thanksgiving, she'd already moved into our family home at 217 Willow Drive. I remember the smell of bacon filling the kitchen that morning while Grandma's apple pie cooled on the counter. Scarlett complimented the pie with that perfect smile, then quietly tossed half of it in the trash when she thought no one was looking. I told myself it didn't matter, she was new, maybe just adjusting. Looking back, that was the first red flag I ignored. At the time, I was 22 and finishing my clinical licensing requirements to become a respiratory therapist. I'd spent years working toward it, internships, night classes, endless studying. My grandmother, before she passed, left me a small silver necklace and a note that said, "Wear this when you help your first patient." That necklace became my good luck charm. I wore it to every exam. When I finally passed my boards, Dad threw a small party. Scarlett insisted on helping me apply for my professional license. Online she said she was good with bureaucratic forms. I didn't think twice. I handed her my documents and ID. 2 weeks later, I got an email saying my application was under review due to duplicate identity concerns. Scarlett brushed it off. "It's probably a system glitch," she said, sipping wine. "Government stuff always gets messy." During my first marriage years before all this, I'd learned what it felt like to doubt an instance. My ex used to gaslight me about small things, where I'd left my keys, what I'd said in a fight. It conditioned me to second-guess everything. Scarlett knew that about me. She'd watched me flinch when people raised their voices, watched how quickly I apologized for things I didn't do. She used it like a weapon. By December, things started getting strange. I applied for a job at Mercy General Hospital, but HR called me in confusion. "Mr. Blake," they said, "we already have your license on file under another name. Or are you reapplying for a position you already hold?" My stomach dropped. Scarlett was standing behind me when I took that call, pretending to scroll through her phone. I caught the faintest smirk before she turned away. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her reflection half lit by the phone's glow, smiling like she knew something I didn't. By early January, I started noticing new mail arriving under my name but with addresses I didn't recognize. Bank notifications, professional associations I'd never joined, credit card pre-approvals in cities I'd never lived in. When I tried to check my credit, I was locked out. I remember confronting her once in the kitchen. The air smelled like burnt toast and bacon. "Scarlett," I said, "why is my email password changed?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "Maybe you forgot it. You're so stressed lately, Harrison." Her voice was calm, almost maternal. It made me question myself. That's the thing about people like her. They don't destroy you all at once. They make you hand them the matches and then convince you the fire was your idea. By March, I was called into HR at the clinic I worked for. "We've had some discrepancies in your paperwork," my boss said. "There are 2 different license numbers under your name. We need to suspend you until this is cleared." I remember sitting in my car afterward, gripping Grandma's neck so tightly it left marks in my palm. Rush hour traffic crawled outside my window, but I couldn't even start the engine. I felt the first panic attack of my life, it hot pounding, chest locked, vision blurring. When I told Dad that evening, Scarlett stood beside him, arms crossed. "Maybe you're just overwhelmed," she said softly. "You've been working too hard." And my father nodded in agreement. That's when I realized I was completely alone in my own home. I didn't know it then, but Scarlett had already planted every seed she needed to ruin me. The rest of that spring was a slow-motion collapse. After the HR meeting, I called the state licensing board every day. Each time, I got the same polite but infuriating response. "Mr. Blake, our system shows your credentials are active under a different address in Arlington." I'd never lived in Arlington. Scarlett's sister did. The realization made my stomach twist. I tried to tell my dad, but he wouldn't listen. Scarlett had already gotten to him, whispering poison behind closed doors. She said, "You've been forgetful," he told me once, frowning. "Maybe therapy would help you handle the stress." Therapy. The word stung, but I took it as a sign. Maybe I did need help. So, I found a counselor and talked to her. Maze, a calm woman with soft eyes who smelled faintly of lavender. During our first session, I told her I couldn't sleep. I felt like my life was slipping away in invisible pieces. She called it chronic and saw me triggered by unresolved trauma. She said my anxiety wasn't random, it was my body trying to warn me something real was wrong. I wish I believed her sooner. Scarlett's manipulation deepened over the next few months. She started controlling what I saw, what I heard. She helped Dad handle the mail, claiming to sort the bills for him. Important letters, bank statements, employment forms started disappearing. One night, I came home late from a shift at the clinic. It was 10:42 p.m. Through the kitchen window, I saw Scarlett whispering to our neighbour, Carl. They stopped talking the second I walked in. I asked what that was about, and Carl stammered something about borrowing sugar. Weeks later, I caught him again, this time crouched by the hedge, holding a camel lens toward my bedroom window. I ran outside barefoot, gravel cutting into my soles. Are you doing? I yelled. He froze, then said flatly, she's paying me. My blood turned to ice. Who? Scarlett. I reported it to the police, but Scarlett had already twisted the story. She told them I'd been acting paranoid and harassing the neighbours. I ended up being warned for disturbing the peace. That night, I locked myself in my room and cried for the first time in years. I couldn't even trust the air around me. During my first marriage, my ex used to tell me I was too sensitive. Scarlett said it too, almost word for word. She mirrored the same phrases, the same tone. It was like being haunted by two ghosts wearing different faces. By summer, the financial damage started showing. I went to withdraw money from my savings account, the one grandma had helped me open before she passed, and it was nearly empty. The $15,000 wedding fund I'd been saving for my future was gone, transferred in small increments to an unknown account. I went to the bank in person, shaking with anger. The teller showed me the signature on the transfer forms, my name, perfectly forged. When I told Scarlett, she gasped, clutched her chest, and said, "Oh, Harrison, that's terrible. Maybe you should have kept better track of your finances." Something inside me snapped. You did this, I hissed. You're behind everything. She smiled, slow and confident. You really shouldn't make accusations without proof. And just like that, she walked away. By August, the insomnia was unbearable. I jolt awake every night from the same nightmare, Scarlett standing over my bed, holding my grandmother's silver necklace, whispering, "It's mine now." I started therapy twice a week. Dr. Mayers said my panic attacks were becoming trauma responses, my body's way of remembering danger before my mind could catch up. My hands trembled constantly. I'd flinch when the phone rang. At work, my boss called me into HR again. "Your recent performance has been concerning," she said. "Late reports, missed shifts, erratic behaviour. Is everything okay at home?" I wanted to scream, "No, nothing's okay." But the words stuck in my throat. The shame was too heavy. I just nodded and promised to get back on track. That's when the whispers started. Coworkers avoiding eye contact, conversation stopping when I entered the break room. Someone had told them I was under investigation for fraud. Scarlett's doing. I knew it, but I had no way to prove it. That September, I found the first real evidence. A flash drive, tiny, silver, hidden inside Scarlett's desk drawer. I plugged it into my laptop, heart racing. What I found made me sick. Dozens of audio recordings. Conversations from my therapy sessions, phone calls, even moments in my bedroom, private moments. They'd been recording me. One file was labelled insurance claim prep. In it, I heard Scarlett's voice say, "If we time this right, he'll look unstable. We can use that in court." Court. What court? That's when it hit me, this wasn't chaos. It was a plan. My entire unravelling had been scripted from the start, and I had no idea how deep it went. It was September 14th, 2022, the kind of sticky, sunless morning that makes the city feel like it's holding its breath. I had finally worked up the courage to confront Scarlett, not directly, but by going through the evidence I'd painstakingly collected. The flash drive I found in her desk was a Pandora's box of my worst fears, each recording a nail in the coffin of my sanity. Scrolling through the files, my hand shook so badly I dropped Grandma's silver necklace onto the keyboard. The clink made me flinch, but I picked it up immediately, clutching it like a lifeline. There were recordings of her whispering instructions to Carl, our neighbour, on when to spy on me. Even worse, she had copies of my tax returns, emails to my licensing board, and personal messages I had sent to friends. Everything I thought was private had been weaponized. I called Dr. Mayers, my therapist, shaking so violently I could barely speak. "Dr. Mayers, she's been recording everything. I think she's destroying my life." There was silence on the line. Then she said calmly, "Harrison, I need you to write down everything. Every date, every transaction, every interaction. This is evidence. You need a plan, not panic." I started digging deeper. I logged into the email account Scarlett had secretly created in my name. That's when the full scoop hit me. My $15,000 wedding fund had been siphoned out in tiny transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. My professional licenses were being used in cities I had never lived in. And most horrifyingly, there were legal documents filed under my name to evict tenants, sue companies, even take loans. Scarlett had been laundering my life for nearly a year before I realized it. I felt sick. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Nightmares plagued me constantly, vivid and cruel. She was always there in them, smirking, holding my grandmother's silver necklace like a trophy. Panic attacks came without warning while driving, during work, even in therapy sessions. I was unraveling. And then came the revelation about the lawyer. Jonathan Price, a slick, greedy man with a permanent smirk and perfectly polished shoes, had been working with Scarlett. Every time I thought I had legal recourse, he blocked me. He claimed my filings were incomplete or invalid, all while bailing exorbitantly for his advice. He'd taken bribes from Scarlett to cover her tracks. It wasn't just my dad, my neighbour, or even the legal system. My betrayal had expanded into a network of people paid to manipulate, spy, and humiliate me. At work, rumours spread like wildfire. My boss called me into HR yet again, citing performance concerns. Whispered conversations followed me down hallways. Friends, noticing my stress, backed away except those who were quietly told I was unstable. Public shame layered on top of private trauma, isolating me entirely. I remember one evening, the smell of bacon frying in my tiny apartment kitchen, the only comfort left to me, made me want to scream. Every sense was tied to my betrayal. I chewed a piece of toast, tasting the bitter mix of eggs and oil, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing control. What I was. One night, I caught myself talking aloud to no one. She's smiling while she destroys everything I care about, I muttered, holding the silver necklace. I trusted her, I trusted all of them. My paranoia wasn't imagined. It was real. She had rewired my entire world. Therapy sessions became my only refuge, a safe place to untangle myself from the fog she had created. Dr. Mayers taught me grounding techniques, mindfulness exercises, and ways to rebuild my shattered sense of self. Still, every shadow, every unexpected knock at the door, brought my panic back full force. Then came the most shocking revelation of all. While combing through digital files, I found one labelled Emergency Plan Harrison. Opening it, my heart froze. Scarlett had been recording my most private moments, anticipating emergencies I hadn't even experienced yet. She had notes, timelines, and plans for manipulating every reaction, panic attacks, therapy sessions, even potential confrontations with my father. Every step I thought was spontaneous had been anticipated, catalogued, and weaponized against me. I sat there in the dim light of my apartment, staring at the files, the room spinning. Then the memory hit me in my accident last February, the car crash that had almost killed me. At first, I blamed my own fatigue, but now I realized it had been planned. She had orchestrated it to look accidental, timed when I was most vulnerable, ensuring maximum chaos in my professional life. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't trust anyone. But in that darkness, a spark formed. I couldn't let her win. Not anymore. I had evidence. I had recordings, bank statements, and witnesses who had been coerced but now were willing to speak. And most importantly, I had a growing awareness of my own strength, cultivated in months of therapy and nights of facing my panic head-on. It wouldn't be over soon, but at least I could start to fight back. The day of the court hearing, May 3rd, 2023, is burned into my memory like a scar. I hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Scarlett's smirk, the flicker of that fake sympathy she wore like makeup. I drove to the courthouse through rush hour traffic, gripping Grandma's silver necklace in one hand, a flash drive in the other. It wasn't just a hearing. It was my reckoning. When I walked in, she was already there, immaculate as ever, hairpinned perfectly, wearing that same lilac perfume that made my stomach twist. My father sat beside her, stiff and unreadable. Scarlett turned to me, lips curling into a soft smile. "Harrison," she said sweetly, "you look exhausted. You should have rested." My voice shook, but I met her eyes. "You should have stopped when you had the chance." Jonathan Price, her pet lawyer, tried to dismiss my case before it even began. "Your Honour," he said, his tone slick as oil, "my client has no knowledge of these fabricated allegations. Mr. Blake is clearly experiencing emotional distress, perhaps due to underlying mental health issues." I almost laughed. The irony burned. But I came prepared. Months of sleepless nights, therapy-fueled clarity, and research had given me ammunition. "Your Honour," I said, standing slowly, "if I may play Exhibit C." The courtroom fell silent. I plugged in the flash drive and hit play. Scarlett's voice filled the room. "If we time this right, he'll look unstable. We can use that in court." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. My father turned toward her, confusion cracking his stoic expression. Jonathan tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand. "Continue, Mr. Blake." Next, I played the recording of her instructing call. "Our neighbour. Make sure you get him on camera when he's panicking. We'll use it for the insurance claim." Then the photos, emails, forged signatures, fake licensing applications, all tied back to Scarlett's digital fingerprints. Every lie she'd built came crashing down in real time. She sat there, hands folded, expression neutral. But when the judge asked, "Miss S. Miller, how do you respond to this?" she smiled. A smile. It was the kind of smile that made my blood run cold. "Your Honour," she said softly, "it's impressive, isn't it, the lengths he'll go to for attention." That was her game, to deny everything until the truth sounded insane. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, panic clawing at the edges of my chest. Dr. May's voice echoed in my head. "Breathe, Harrison. Stay grounded. You know you're true." So I breathed. I looked the judge straight in the eye. "My life was stolen," I said, voice trembling but steady. "She forged my license, emptied my accounts, paid people to watch me through my windows, and made me think I was losing my mind, but I have proof, every file, every transaction, every recording." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Scarlett's eyes. Just for a second. Then came the twist. Jonathan Price stood abruptly, fumbling through his briefcase. "Your Honour," he stammered, I was just informed that certain evidence may have been submitted under false pretenses. He turned on her. Apparently, when he realized I had enough to expose him to his payments, his fake filings, he decided self-preservation was worth more than loyalty. He handed over an envelope to the court clerk. His side were bank records proving Scarlett had paid him $12,000 to sabotage my filings and delay investigations. The courtroom erupted. Reporters in the back started whispering furiously. My father's face went pale. The judge slammed the gavel. Order! Scarlett leaned back in her chair, mask slipping for the first time. I saw it, the coldness, the rage. She wasn't the charming manipulator anymore. She was a cornered predator. You think you've won? She hissed as we recessed for deliberation. I met her gaze. No, I think I finally stopped losing. When the ruling came, the air in that courtroom crackled. The judge's voice was firm and unwavering. This court finds sufficient evidence of identity fraud, defamation, and malicious intent. Pending further investigation, Mrs. Miller's assets are frozen, and formal charges will proceed. Asked. Cameras clicked. Scarlett didn't move. They didn't blink. Just stared straight ahead, that eerie calm settling back onto her face. As she was escorted out, she turned to me and whispered, "You'll never undo what I started." But for the first time in years, I didn't believe her. The weight of every sleepless night, every panic attack, every moment of doubt began to lift. My legs almost gave out as I walked out of that courthouse, sunlight hitting my face like forgiveness. Dad didn't speak to me as I passed him. He just looked small, confused, broken. I wanted to hate him for believing her, but I couldn't. Scarlett had fooled us all. As I stepped outside, the noise of the crowd faded into hum. The smell of asphalt and car exhaust mixed with something sweet, someone selling apple pies from a food cart nearby. It hit me all at once, Grandma's apple pie. Home. Safety. For the first time in forever, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could breathe again. After the courtroom victory, I thought relief would come like a wave. It didn't. Not even close. In fact, the weeks that followed were worse, like surviving a hurricane only to find the debris still smouldering around you. Even though Scarlett was under investigation, the damage she'd done couldn't be erased overnight. My reputation at work had been shattered. HR files still listed me as under review. Whispers followed me through hallways, and a few colleagues I once trusted avoided eye contact altogether. My boss finally called me in this time to apologize, but it felt hollow. "We're clear on your record, Harrison," she said, "but you need to prove you're ready to perform again." My hand shook as I nodded. I was proving nothing to anyone. I felt like my life was a public spectacle. The insomnia didn't stop. Each night I would stare at the ceiling, visions of Scarlett standing over me, her smirk carved into my skull. The nightmares had intensified. She would be holding Grandma's silver necklace, whispering, "You're mine, Harrison." My pulse would spike, chest constricting, and I'd wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Panic attacks became a nightly ritual, no matter how many grounding exercises Dr. Mayers taught me. Medication helped a little, but the trust issues lingered. I couldn't look at anyone without imagining they were plotting against me. Friends called less and less, some disappeared entirely. Social media was a minefield, people I didn't know commenting on my mental breakdown, strangers assuming the worst. My life had become a performance of trauma. Even at home, safety was elusive. I had moved into a small apartment downtown, but I felt like I was constantly being watched. Every knock on the door, every shadow outside the window, made me flinch. Paul's betrayal still echoed in my mind, a paid to spy, documenting my panic, feeding information to Scarlett. Even now, months later, I couldn't shake the sense that someone was always listening. I stopped going out unless absolutely necessary. Grocery stores, coffee shops, even the small corner bakery, the place where I used to love the smell of fresh bacon and pie, felt threatening. I could taste the fear in every bite, hear the whispers in every mundane conversation. Financially, I was still reeling. The $15,000 wedding fund. Done. My savings. Decimated by fraudulent transactions I had only partially recovered. Bills piled up, insurance complications lingered, and my student loans went into temporary default. Every interaction with a bank or insurance company reminded me of Scarlett's manipulation. My lawyer bills were astronomical, thanks to Jonathan Price's betrayal, and even after he flipped, it left me drained and resentful. Dr. Mayers suggested intensive therapy, cognitive behavioral sessions 3 times a week, grounding exercises, endorphin trauma processing. I agreed, though each session left me raw and exhausted. Lying on the recliner, reliving every moment of betrayal, hearing Scarlett's voice in my head, I wondered if I'd ever feel safe again. The community reaction was brutal. Neighbours who had once smiled at me now whispered behind their hands. People I'd known my whole life stared with suspicion. Even family gatherings felt impossible. My father was caught between guilt and denial, uncertain how to act around me. It was as if Scarlett had poisoned not just my life, but the very environment I existed in. During one session, I finally admitted the truth to Dr. Mayers. I feel like I'm haunted not just by her, but by myself, my own mistakes, my own gullibility. She nodded. That's the nature of manipulation trauma. It rewires your brain to expect betrayal, to distrust reality itself, but it doesn't have to define your future. Harrison, we'll rebuild the foundations, one at a time. Rock bottom hit in late June. I remember sitting on the curb outside my apartment, the summer heat suffocating, hands trembling, Grandmother's silver necklace in my palm. I felt hollow. My life, my career, my relationships, my trust had been stolen, and though the law was catching up to Scarlett, it didn't matter. Nothing could undo the months of terror, humiliation, and isolation. The public shame, the whispers, the betrayal's neighbour, lawyer, father, co-workers, they all converged in a suffocating storm. I had no energy left to fight. I wanted to disappear, to vanish, but somewhere deep inside, a small ember of resolve flickered. I didn't know how to protect it yet, but I knew it was there. That night, I held the necklace, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, I can't undo the past, but I can survive it. It was the first conscious thought of hope I had in months. And though it was faint, it marked the start of something I would need desperately in the months to come rebirth. The first morning after that night on the curb, I woke up to sunlight spilling across the cracked linoleum of my tiny apartment. My body was exhausted, my mind still jitty from panic, but for the first time, I felt a tiny spark of agency. I had survived Scarlett. I had survived myself. And now, it was time to reclaim my life. I started small. Dr. Mayers guided me through intensive therapy CBT aimed at mindfulness. For months, I practiced grounding exercises every morning, holding Grandma's silver necklace while repeating affirmations. I'm safe. I am real. I am in control. Slowly, my panic attacks lessened. Sleep came in fitful increments at first, but eventually, I began to reclaim nights of rest. Therapy didn't erase the trauma, it taught me how to hold it without letting it consume me. Financially, I began rebuilding. I closed accounts compromised by Scarlett, consolidated what I could recover, and started a strict budget to stabilise myself. I even confronted Jonathan Price, forcing him to return a portion of his illicit gains as part of a legal settlement. I remember telling him sharply, you thought you could profit from my collapse, not anymore. Watching him squirm was strangely liberating. At work, I took baby steps to repair my reputation. I documented everything meticulously, shared verified licenses and credentials, and slowly regained trust. Some co-workers remained distant, but the whispers lost power once the court rulings made Scarlett's manipulation public. I could finally walk through hallways without the weight of suspicion pressing against my chest. But the biggest change wasn't external, it was internal. Travelling became my therapy. I booked flights on a whim, starting with Costa Rica. I learned to hike through jungles, swim in waterfalls, and taste foods so foreign and exhilarating I forgot, for hours at a time, that I had ever been betrayed. I danced on beaches under the moonlight, laughed at street performers in Barcelona, and even learned to cook authentic Italian pasta in a small class in Florence. The world was alive again, and I felt alive too. Everywhere I went, Grandma's silver necklace hung against my chest, a reminder of resilience and love that had survived generations. I even started journaling again, recounting each step of my journey, not just the pain, but the small victories. The first night I slept uninterrupted, the first time I opened my savings account without anxiety, the first conversation I had where I truly trusted someone. Relationships, once fractured, began to heal slowly. I reconnected with friends who had believed in me, and I allowed myself to lean on them without guilt. I re-established boundaries with my father, who finally admitted his own guilt and fear of Scarlett's manipulation. We began to rebuild trust, cautiously, like planting seeds in soil that had once been poisoned. Most importantly, I learned to trust myself. I no longer doubted my instincts, no longer apologized for emotions that were valid. Scarlett had tried to dismantle me, but I emerged with a clear understanding of my worth, my strength, and my resilience. In the months that followed, I even took on advocacy work. I spoke publicly about identity theft, manipulation trauma, and legal exploitation. Each talk, each article, each recorded testimony became a way to reclaim my story and help others avoid the traps I had fallen into. My nightmares didn't vanish entirely, but their grip loosened. I remember standing on a cliff in Thailand, wind whipping my hair, ocean stretching endlessly below. I clutched the silver necklace, eyes closed, and whispered I survived. I am free. It wasn't just about Scarlett anymore. It was about me. Now, I travel with intention. I document cultures, taste foods I never imagined, hike mountains that intimidate and exhilarate in equal measure. I've returned to my profession, this time with full control over my licenses and finances. I've made peace with the past while forging a future that's undeniably mine. The trauma rewired me. Yes, it taught me vigilance, resilience, and empathy for those trapped by manipulative forces. But it did not break me. I learned that the hardest battles often birth the strongest warriors. Standing on that cliff, silver necklace warm against my chest, I finally understood. Scarlett may have tried to steal my life, my identity, and my trust, but she could not steal my strength. And that is mine forever.